Okay, good morning to everyone in South Africa. Welcome, colleagues. Today's event is about to get started on behalf of Bentham Science. My name is Scott, and I'll be coordinating this event for you today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for making time to join our event today. We're thrilled to have you here, and we're thrilled to be here for all of our authors and colleagues in South Africa. The topic tonight is powerful publishing strategies for researchers. And who better to guide us through this topic than someone who is a very well published author, a journal editor, a peer reviewer. He's done all kinds of things in the publishing world. He's also a beloved educator on the internet, my colleague, Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth,
What?
welcome.
Hey Scott, how you doing? Hi everybody. Great to be here. Great to see so many colleagues and friends from South Africa. And how you doing today, Scott? Everything going well?
Doing fantastically well. Yeah, it's a lovely spring day again here in Tokyo, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Let us know where you're from, which university you're joining us from in the chat. Everybody should have access to the webinar chat here on Zoom. We'd love to know where you're from, maybe a little bit about your research, right, Scott? That helps us to target these events better in the future.
Yes, please let us know where you're joining us from, and in particular, your institution. As Gareth said, maybe let us know what kind of research or what kind of studies you're doing. We're expecting a mixed audience tonight of all kinds of researchers and graduate students and pre-grads and all kinds of people joining us today. So let us know where you're joining from and what kind of work you're doing.
Absolutely. Hi, Nadia, Rentia as well. Thank you so much for the invitation to do this. And yeah, we can see like people are letting us know Cape Town Libraries, University of Johannesburg, University of Pretoria, Rhodes University. Wow, wow. Excellent.
Great to see colleagues joining us from all over the country. And Gareth, this is one of our most popular and, well, powerful, forgive me, powerful topics that we talk about with researchers, isn't it? Publishing strategies, no matter what stage of research that you're in, whether you're a pre-doc or a pre-master's or whether you're a postdoc or even an experienced researcher, we always need better strategies to try to improve our publication impact, don't we?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So that's what we're going to talk about in our event today. Everybody should feel very free to give us comments in the chat box. There's also a webinar Q&A that you can use if you want to get involved. And then there'll be follow-up after the event, right, Scott?
We will send certificates of attendance to everyone joining us today. So if you miss anything, we sometimes throw a lot of information at you. So if you happen to miss anything, don't worry, you'll get access to the full video recording. We'll send that out around this time tomorrow. You'll get the full video with transcript and even all the chats that we've engaged in tonight. We'll also send you, as I mentioned, the certificate of attendance for today. And Gareth will be happy to take your questions at the end of the event. So at any time, you can type your questions into the Q&A box. There's a little Q&A panel there. You can type questions there. We'll gather them up. And then at the end of the event today, Gareth will be happy to answer them the best that he can. And if there are any questions that even the wonderful Dr. Gareth Dyke cannot answer, which is rare, I will say, he usually has answers for almost everything. But if you manage to stump Dr. Dyke, we will be happy to follow up and get an answer for you. So, any questions about publishing strategies, anything at all, let us know and we'll try to answer at the end.
Fantastic. I can see the University of the Free State, um, Mpumalanga. Forgive my pronunciation. Maybe Scott, you have another idea. Yeah, great to see everybody. And we're here, of course, at the invitation of Nadia and Rentia, but also on behalf of Bentham Science, right, Scott? We do these events all over the place, all of the time for Bentham Science Publishing.
Right. If you're not familiar with Bentham Science, Bentham is a growth publisher based in Amsterdam and Sharjah in the Emirates. And if you are a librarian and you would like to get free access to trial Bentham's journals for your institution, there's a QR code. All you need to do is scan that and fill out a very quick form, and the Bentham team will reach out to you and grant you access to the full collection, including Impact Factor journals, the full collection with no strings, no payments, nothing for 3 months, just to try Bentham's high quality and ethically peer-reviewed journals at your institution.
Maybe you know a librarian you'd like to send this QR code to. Maybe you're joining us from your university and you'd like to send this QR code to your librarian. That would also be absolutely fantastic. And as Scott mentioned, this gives you completely free access to more than 40 impact factor journals. Of course, there are discounts, there are other opportunities available. Just get in touch with Nadia or Rentia at the end of this event to learn more about Bentham. As Scott mentioned, this is Bentham Science.
Right, Bentham publishes leading, as you can see here, scientific, technical, and medical research, as well as others, including a bit of psychology and other fields, related fields in the life sciences and medicine, and also the hard sciences, as you see here, medicinal chemistry and such. There are more than 160 online and print journals with a hybrid and open access journals, and more than 1,300 online and print books, as you can see. And Bentham also offers a number of books and journals in related fields and gold open access journals, as you can see on the next slide. And we'll talk a bit more about open access and open science. Gareth is going to give us some tips on how we can make the most of open access publishing and some things to look for and even some things to avoid if you're looking at publishing open access.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do have a look at Bentham Science Publishers if you're interested in finding a great venue for your next piece of research. Of course. Thank you so much. Here's what we're going to talk about in our event today, right, Scott? We're almost ready to go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Do give us more feedback in the chat.
Please do let us know if you have any questions or comments. Gareth is going to run us through some strategies first. He's going to talk about what open access publishing is and the benefits for authors. We'll talk about choosing a journal, some journal selection strategies, always an important consideration for authors. And finally, Gareth is going to explain to us some of his final thoughts and recommendations for authors, no matter what your career stage, whether you're an experienced researcher, whether you're a student. Gareth will tell us some of his final suggestions and strategies for maximizing your publishing impact.
Fantastic. I think we're just about ready to go. Let's get on with the event today. Scott will be back bouncing in and out as we go through our event. We have a number of polls and other ways that we hope you will find engaging as we go through our event today. But let's begin by talking a little bit about open access publishing, what that is and how that can be, how open access can be a great strategy for you as a researcher to make sure that your work achieves maximum impact. Now, in terms of the academic publishing cycle that you can see here on this slide, all of us go round this hamster wheel, as we like to call it in our events, Scott and I, from ideas, funding, data collection, journal selection, article writing, submission, and then peer review and publication. Open access is a key consideration at many stages of the research cycle. So presenting your data, your publication, your research in a way that means that it's accessible to everybody. That is what, of course, open access is. And it doesn't have to just apply to journal publishing. It can also apply to your data, peer review, as well as submission and the final publication. But the point of this is we're going to be publishing, we're going to be putting our work out there in a way that means that what we produce is accessible to everybody. So, as it says here, open access publishing means that your research outputs become freely accessible to everybody. And this could include articles, data, results, and as I mentioned, also, in some cases, also peer review. And as we'll talk about again in a moment, if you do choose to publish your research open access, you are going to retain the copyright, which is a really important consideration for researchers and often not something that we think about too much when we do go forward and publish our research. But if you publish your work in a traditional paywalled subscription journal, you're very often handing over the copyright of your research to the journal or to the publisher, which is not something that many researchers really think about. But what if you want to commercialize the research in the future or reuse it in the future? If you publish open access, your research is covered by copyright and you're allowed to reuse it with attribution. And the work will, of course, be permanently archived in a recognized repository, for example, PubMed Central. So, an initial advantage of considering open access publishing is that your work is freely accessible to everybody, but also you retain the copyright of that research. So, open access is a key pillar of the broader open science movement, open access publishing, and this intersects with ideas like open data, fair data practices, and of course, collaborative research. If we're doing research and sharing it widely open and online, more people can collaborate with us, more people can get access to what we're doing. So basically, if you choose to publish your work open access, Bentham Open, you're going to get greater visibility, improved reproducibility, and this naturally will enhance your research collaboration. You're going to get access to more researchers because more researchers are going to be able to see what you're doing. And data shows actually if you publish your work open access, you're going to get about 7 times more citations of the work that you do. So it's important for us to have a quick look at open access as a movement and think about why it became so popular and continues to be a very popular way for researchers to publish their outputs. We saw a big crisis, we still do, in scholarly publishing as subscription rates increase and library budgets decrease. There's a big push, there always has been, from researchers, universities, funders, and even governments for us to put our work out there freely accessible and online. More researchers need access to up-to-date resources and they don't want to have to pay to access that content. And then, of course, as we see the rise of digital technologies, easier dissemination and connectivity, everybody simply wants to have access to more research all of the time. So these are reasons behind the growth of open access publishing. It's also important for us to have a quick look at the different models. Well, you may have heard of gold open access. That's what Bentham does. That's what most publishers do. You are publishing open. Everybody gets immediate access to what you publish, but there's often a charge for that service that researchers or universities or funding agencies have to carry. And that's the dreaded article processing charge, but this is gold open access publishing. And of course, there are a number of big publishers, Frontiers, MDPI, to name but two, that only publish gold open access research content. That's the main model. You can, of course, as well choose to publish your work in a subscription journal, so you don't have to pay, but not everybody would have access to that content, and then archive a late stage version of your research, perhaps the final accepted Word document, not the final paginated version that gets published in the journal, on a repository. So give people access to a late stage version of the research, not the final published version. This is called green open access publishing, and many funding agencies, many governments mandate at least this if they give you funding for research. And then finally, we often see a model that's called diamond open access. That's where a university or a society owns a journal and they support that journal publishing open access, so there's no charge for researchers. Not so common, a bit expensive, common maybe for some scholarly societies or if a university owns a journal, let's say. But this is important to be aware of, these different models for open access publishing. And Bentham, by the way, uses all of these. All of the Bentham journals can be converted to open access if you pay a fee. Bentham has those 40 gold open access, fully open journals in their Bentham Open division. And Bentham also supports a number of societies in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, to name but two, where the journals are publishing in a diamond model. So those are the background models for open access publishing. This just summarizes, as we've been talking about, the difference between traditional publishing, where paywalls restrict access, funded by subscriptions. Access is only possible if you or your institution has a subscription, versus open access publishing, where all of the content freely accessible, funded by author fees, those article processing charges, institutional support, or something called subscribe to open. And that's where an institution or a country or a region pays a fee to a publisher, and then everybody gets access. Authors can also put their papers into journals without having to pay a fee. And so if you think this is something you'd be interested in learning more about from Nadia and Rentier, get in touch with them at the end of our event today. So if you choose to publish open access, you're going to get increased readership and more citations of your work. You get access to Altmetric data. You can learn a lot more about what's happening with your research publications. You get greater visibility and greater impact, compliance with funder mandates, global collaboration, and of course, level the playing field around the world in terms of people you can work with, collaborate with, and who will have access to your research. It's much fairer for researchers all around the world, because if you publish open access, everybody can get access to that content. So we thought we'd start off by talking about that. We thought we'd begin this event today by talking about what is open access. Then we thought we'd talk more generally about journal selection, right, Scott? Like, this is really important and something that many researchers as a publication strategy need to think more about, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I just posted a question in the chat. If any researchers joining us today have published in open access, let us know your experiences, or if you've published in any Bentham or Bentham open access journals, let us know your experiences. And of course, as researchers, we've all accessed open access journals and cited and quoted them in our work. So the next level is if you're considering publishing your next work, is to publish in an open access journal potentially.
Have a look at Bentham Open, have a look at Bentham Science Publishers. That big portfolio of 176 journals, we call them hybrid journals because you don't have to pay to publish in them. But if you want to publish open access, then you pay that conversion fee to convert your paper to full open access. Or you go for one of the 40 fully open access journals in the Bentham Open portfolio. But let's talk about selecting a journal, the next stage, really important area of the publication cycle. Many researchers don't think all that much about this, but we're all used to getting letters like this, aren't we? Many thanks for asking whether we would like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but we're simply not willing to publish it. The good bits were not original, and the original bits were not good. All of us as researchers get rejected by journals all of the time. But if you follow some of the tips and tricks that we are presenting today and in our other events, if you'd like to listen to more of them, they're all on the Bentham Science YouTube channel. You can jump on over there and have a listen to many of our other events that Scott and I have done and do for Bentham Science. You're going to be guiding your readers, providing context in your research article, discussing in the introduction existing information on that particular topic. Then in the figures and results, discuss your new information about that topic as you go ahead and put your research article together, and then synthesize new information in the context of existing information to emphasize the value of your study to a particular research field. So if you are writing your paper and thinking about how to put it together for publication, as you begin that process, then you will be able to put the research together for a fantastic journal at the end of the day. Because In the end, there are around 2 million research papers published every year in STM subjects and around 30,000 published every month just in the medical sciences. So, one key consideration for researchers is how are you going to stand out? How are you going to make sure that as many people as possible read your research when you publish your research? 2 million papers published every year, and it's ever increasing as we see more AI tools being used by researchers, used by journals, 30,000 each month just in the medical sciences. So lots of papers being published. How are you going to make sure that your research stands out? Well, one way to do that effectively is to have a think about which journal you're going to select for your research before you begin to write. And Scott and I do spend a lot of time talking about this with researchers all over the world. It's very, very important to have a journal in mind before you begin the writing process. And that's because every journal is different. What kind of article you're going to write will be different depending upon the journal. Will it be a letter, a rapid communication, a piece of original research? So to do this effectively, we've got some tips and tricks coming up in a moment, but do talk to colleagues. Talk to colleagues, talk to your supervisor, talk to other researchers in your department, and do make pre-submission inquiries in order to get your research published in the best possible journal. It's great to do this before you begin to write. Consider also the use of preprint platforms. Look at the journals international colleagues use for their submissions, and we do recommend that you make a ranked list of 5 to 10 key journals in your research field that you can then consistently choose from with your research as you go forward in your career. And we also recommend that you aim high, go for those higher impact factor journals if possible, but each article, each piece of research is going to be a little different. So with experience comes that skill where you can start to identify which journals would be appropriate for each piece of research that you do. But if you write to editors before you begin the writing process, you've got a piece of research, you've got some data, you know the outcomes from a particular study, do write to those editors, send off those pre-submission inquiries before you pick a journal, because this will really, really help you to target your research to a great journal. And of course, there's no limit to the number of these pre-submission inquiry emails that you can send to editors. You commit yourself to nothing, but you do get a much better sense of which journals would be interested in publishing your work. So that's really, really, really well worth doing. And what we'll do as well at the end of this event today is we'll provide you with an email template that you can use to write to editors about your research and ask them, would you be interested in seeing a submission to your journal on this particular topic? Journal editors love it when you write to them, when you get in touch, when you pitch a piece of research to their journal before submission. Because authors, you and me, we tend to want speed for our research articles. We also tend to want as many people to read those papers as possible. And that's why we talk about open access as a model for publishing our research. And then finally, we also do tend to want a decent impact factor for each of our publications. So authors want speed. Authors want high reach and readership. And authors want a decent impact factor as a model for where they want to get their work published. So these are the components of selection for journals. And if you're interested, by the way, in learning more about open access and open access journals, do have a look at these resources that we put together on this slide. The Spark Author Addendum Sherpa Romeo, the Directory of Open Access Journals, a great place to go to check if your journal that you've selected is reputable, for example, the directory of open access journals, and then the open door, the directory of open access repositories. And then finally, as well, we do recommend the fantastic resource thinkchecksubmit.org, which gives you a great way to check, as we'll come on to in a moment, whether a journal that's written to you about potentially publishing with them really is a good choice. There are many predatory journals out there, as we'll talk about in a moment. So, do write to editors. There's no limit on the number of editors you can write to before you make your submission. This will help you to select a target journal effectively. If you've got your abstract, if you've got your title ready to go, then reach out to journal editors with that information. Give them the title, give them the key takeaway from the research. Ask them, would you be interested in a submission from us, from our research group, to your journal? And as I mentioned already, we're going to give you that template, our fantastic email template for writing an effective pre-submission inquiry at the end of our event today. Right, Scott? This is something that we always follow up with at the end of our events.
That's right. We'll send everyone the template that Gareth mentioned. This is the pre-submission inquiry template. And just to be clear, a pre-submission inquiry is just a fancy way to say, send an email to a journal editor and see if they might be interested in publishing your paper at some point. Maybe you have a rough abstract in mind, you've started doing your research or collecting results. You can reach out to a journal with this pre-submission inquiry or pre-submission email and see if they might be interested. And that'll help save you a bit of selection time. Great. Let's take a look at a poll here for pre-submission inquiries. Let's see if everyone was paying attention. I'll launch the poll here. The question is, how many pre-submission inquiries can you send to journals at a time? Is it only one? Is it up to three pre-submission inquiries, or is it unlimited? Let's see what our audience thinks.
Yeah, maybe you were paying attention when we talked about this just a moment ago. While the poll is filling in, I have a message from our lovely colleague Julie. She's asked me to announce that we are opening a publishing trial for all Sandlik member institutions on a start date of April the 13th, and it's going to end in July. So April, May, June, July. So any papers submitted within that time frame will not have a APC, which is fantastic, right?
Fantastic to save that APC charge. So yeah, thank you, Julie, for sharing that. So researchers joining us today, you still have a bit of time to take advantage of that no APC offer. Let's take a look at the results of our poll here. Looks like people are paying attention. So yes, the best answer here is you can send as many as you like. This is just the pre-submission inquiry emails, not to be confused with submitting your paper to a journal formally. Of course, you can only send your paper to one journal at a time. But as far as an inquiry, you can send as many as you like and just gather some sense of journals and whether they might be interested in publishing your paper at some point.
It's really well worth doing, and not a lot of researchers do this. I mean, higher impact factor journals ask you to make pre-submission inquiries. What we're advocating, what we're recommending, what we're showing is a great strategy for researchers is to do this with all of your submissions. And as Scott said, as the poll results show, there is no limit to the number of these pre-submission inquiries that you can send. So use it as a technique to get a great journal lined up for your next paper.
Question for you, Gareth. You're a journal editor, and sometimes we get questions from our attendees asking, well, why not just submit to that journal? Why not choose that journal, write the paper for that journal, and then submit to that journal? Why take that extra step to send a
Mhm.
pre-submission inquiry? What's the advantage?
Because your paper might get rejected, it might not get published in the journal that you think you would like to have the paper published in. And then, of course, you're stuck with a paper that's all ready and all formatted and all, set for a particular journal. You've just gotten rejected. You have to rewrite, reformat. Much better strategy to have a journal in mind and then go through that step and make sure you maximize your chances of publication. Another way to do this as well, by the way, is to have a look at preprint platforms. These are fantastic, great place to share your research with the world pre-journal submission. So preprint platforms, have a look at these. They're really worth your time. They are online repositories for academic work. You can put your work there before peer review and online publication. Corrections then that come in on your work, remember this is before it goes into a journal for peer review. So you're getting pre-peer review peer reviews from the community. Corrections come in, they can help you to significantly improve your work. And you also get to share your work fast with other interested researchers. Peer review can happen quickly and open, and often journal editors select research papers from preprint platforms as a way of getting more content for their journals. But don't worry, your priority and author intellectual property are protected by what we call a Creative Commons license. People often ask us, if I put work on a preprint platform, won't it just get stolen? Actually, no. You put your work on a preprint platform, it gets stamped with a Creative Commons license. It's much harder for somebody to steal your data, steal your results if you do go and use a preprint platform. But let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. Scott, we have another exciting poll.
Yes, we've got a 1-2 punch in polls for today's presentation. Our poll is on preprints. Let's see if who was paying attention. What copyrights do you keep when you publish on a preprint server? Do you keep all of the copyrights? Do you keep only some? Or do you give up all of your copyrights when you publish on a preprint server?
People often ask us about copyrights. This is not something that many researchers are really all that familiar with, but you should be aware of what happens to the copyright, to the ownership of your own work when you go into the publishing system. It's really important. So we also encourage you to have a think about this as well.
Okay, thanks to everyone for answering the poll. The best answer is in nearly all cases, you keep all the copyrights. Gareth, is this a strategy that you have used as an author? Have you published on preprint servers?
Increasingly, yeah, because this is a great way not just to share your new outputs, your new research with like a wider group of researchers, but also to get feedback. And of course, as the poll results show, Scott, you do keep all the copyright if you do this, right?
Right. It's a strategy that I haven't really explored, and I confess I've learned from you, Gareth. And I see that a lot of people used it during the COVID epidemic as a way to get research out more quickly and get it in front of the colleagues for some initial feedback before publishing formally in a journal. So, yeah, it's a rising trend.
Yeah, and so we encourage if you're listening to this and you haven't thought before about pre-printing your work, do that, have a look at that, like make those journal pre-submission inquiries to journals and have a think as well about open access as a publishing strategy. Selecting the right open access journal is a little bit difficult because we do get lots of emails, lots of invitations for us to submit to different journals, to put our work into guest edited special issues, for example. Do have a look at the directory of open access journals. The DOAJ is the journal that you're considering publishing your work in listed in a reputable directory like the DOAJ? What are its licensing and copyright policies? And also, are there any publication fees? Go into this with your eyes open. Do spend the time researching the journals that you might want to choose to publish your work in. And watch out for fake ones. This model for open access publishing, where authors pay article processing charges to make the paper fully open access, has of course led to a rise in journals, publishers that are fake, that are predatory. They're trying just to get their little hands on your money. They want to cheat you out of your money and your research. They're getting more and more sophisticated, and it can be quite difficult to spot the difference between a real and a fake journal. So what we've done here quickly is just given you a few guidelines in order to do that. Have a look at the website, have a look at where the journal is indexed, who's on the editorial board. Do you know those researchers? You can write to them and find out if they really are aware that they're on that editorial board. Is the journal publishing papers regularly? Are there any fees? You should never, ever, 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 ever pay a fee for submission or pay anything to a journal or a publisher until your paper has been accepted. And does the publisher send lots of spammy emails full of empty promises? These are key ways that we do recommend you think about whether the journal that you're considering is a fake one or not. A real open access journal is listed in COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, DWAJ, OASPA, other reputable databases shown here. The journal has a robust peer review process. Bentham Science, for example, does all of its peer review triple blind, which means that the editor is not involved in selecting peer reviewers, and the peer reviewers and the authors do not know each other's identities. A fantastic system, double or triple blind. Nobody knows who anybody else is. This removes a lot of bias from the peer review process. So as if you needed convincing to select a Bentham Science journal for your next publication, this is another great thing to think about. You're going to get treated super, 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 super fairly by choosing a Bentham Science journal. And the fees, of course, are fair, clearly listed and explained in detail. So do have a look at these resources. As Scott mentioned, we will be sending you a recording of this event at the end so you can listen again. Tips for choosing an open access journal listed here. The journal's reputation. Do you recognize recent authors? Is it indexed in the DWAJ? What are the licensing terms, funding options, and potential APCs? And do have a look for journals that align with your research goals. So, having talked about what open access is, and having given you a few tips and tricks for choosing a journal for your next piece of fantastic research, we're now going to just give you a few final thoughts and recommendations on the publishing process as a strategy or series of strategies to be as successful as possible. We've talked about copyright, we've talked about licensing. Do have a look at this as a researcher, because the kind of copyright shown here that your open access journal is using is important to be aware of. Are you going, for example, to be able to reuse your own research in the future for commercial purposes? Is it going to be allowed under these different kinds of CC licenses? And any questions, we'll be delighted to talk about that as we come to our Q&A at the end in just a moment. You're ready to submit. You're ready to go to that journal. What about your prior publications? What about preprint policies of that journal? What about the conference material that's in your manuscript? Are there any embargo rules on previously shared research? Are you salami slicing your paper up? And is this a translation of something that has been previously published in another language? A few things to think about, a few things to think, a checklist, if you will, to go through before you make your next submission. Any questions, of course, we'll be happy to talk about this in more detail in just a moment. And you will need an ORCID ID. If you haven't got one of these yet, you probably should get one. It's a not-for-profit charitable organization that allows you to be easily identifiable with your ORCID ID, distinguishable from other researchers around the world. They're fantastic. The ORCID website will help you put your CV together. It collects all of your papers in one place. And you've all seen, I hope, these little green ID badges that appear next to your name on your publication. So do get a ORCID ID if you haven't got one yet. You probably will need one for your next article submission. When it comes to writing the paper itself, we always like to emphasize that you do need a fantastic title. And we'll talk about the abstract in just a moment as well. But selling your work to a journal, writing a pre-submission inquiry, or talking about your work, getting it read, getting it into a fantastic journal, open access or otherwise, you're going to need a great title with the fewest possible words that adequately describe the contents of the paper. Keep your title short. The main issue, the subject, accurate, unambiguous, specific and complete, no infrequently used abbreviations. Above all, you'll want to attract readers to your work. It's got to be concise, informative. The most important words related to the topic get people interested in reading your paper. Entice them, allure them, make them think. Editors and other researchers, this is a really fantastic topic. I want to learn more. I want to read more about this research. It's got to be there. And here, for example, are some recent titles that are really compelling. We're just going to have a quick look at these really, really quickly. They are great titles, some of the highest cited research from the last few years. And you'll notice that they're all quite short. They're all 7 or 8 words in length. Many of them use a number of tricks that we often talk about for putting together a fantastic title, that colon in the middle to break up the title, something short, specific, and then something general, or something general, colon, and then something more specific. Or, as you can see in our third example, they are using a question-based title form to get people interested in wanting to read more. A view on vitamin D, a pleiotropic factor. So as you put your title together, do consider some of these tricks and tips that we have for being effective. A short title will get you read. You'll get more citations. The generalness, the generality, the interest of your title will mean that more people are going to engage. More people are going to want to read your paper. And the same goes for the abstract, by the way. Often, editors, peer reviewers, and even other researchers will only read your title and abstract. So they've got to be great. Most people don't read the whole of the paper, do they? When was the last time you read the whole of a research paper? So your 200 or 300 word abstract, depending upon your target journal, has got to be honest and precise. It's got to stand alone. It's all that many people will read. No technical jargon, short and specific, and often no references. The quality of your abstract will inform your editor's decision. So do put the time and effort and energy into this. Many journals now base their decisions on what to do with pieces of research submitted to their journals, to their publications, based on the abstract alone. And of course, authors often write their abstracts in a huge rush, almost as an afterthought. It's got to be a standalone piece of writing with a very clear message, accurately reflecting the full text of the paper. You can write a fantastic abstract for your next piece of research by following our clever 4-question-based technique. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? If you write down those questions, answer them with information related to your particular research topic, and then delete the questions, you will be in fantastic shape to put together a well-written and well-structured abstract. Because, of course, most people don't have time to read everything that gets published in their field. They read abstracts to keep up to date on research. And as we've mentioned already, your abstract is often the only thing that other people are going to read to engage with your article. So do keep this in mind. Make a screenshot of this fantastic slide. It's the 4-question-based technique. You can copy this if you want to write a fantastically well-structured abstract for your next research. Why did the study need to be done? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? How does this research advance the field? In that sequence, answer those 4 questions. You will have a fantastically structured, well-written abstract that will stand you in good stead as you go for submission to your favorite journal. So today's key takeaways before we come back and start with our Q&A. Different open access models offer various benefits. Choose wisely. Use reputable tools and resources to evaluate your options. And let's also take some time as researchers to understand licensing and quality indicators before selecting and choosing a journal. Key takeaways from our event today. What have we talked about? Well, we have talked about what open access is. We've talked about how you can choose a journal, not just an open access journal, but any research journal. And we've given you a few tips for doing that about copyright and titles and abstracts. Scott, how are we doing? I think we have some time for questions and answers at the end of our event today.
We do have a bit of time left for some questions. So if you have questions for Gareth, feel free to type them into the Q&A box, or if you're not able to access the Q&A box for whatever reason, you can just type them into the chat, and we'll try to answer the best that we can. And while the questions are coming in, I just wanted to say, Gareth, I think your recommendations for writing the abstract are spot on. That four-question approach, if you could just go back to the four questions: why the study needed to be done, what you did, what you found, and how it advances the field, is a fantastic approach for writing. When I'm editing abstracts for authors here in Japan, I take this very same approach to try to make a very clear narrative, to tell a narrative story of the discovery that you've made is super important as you reach out to journals and editors with your paper, with your title and abstract. Tell them a story. Tell them what mystery you're solving as a researcher. You're a researcher, which means you discovering things that people have never discovered before. And the abstract is like the advertisement, the tagline of your new scientific discovery. So don't skip this part. Spend extra time on the abstract, even though you're probably writing it last, together with your
Uh-huh.
title. I strongly suggest you listen to Gareth's tips and advice on writing the abstract. So any questions for Gareth, feel free to type them away. Let me just check the Q&A panel here. One of our guests, Netza, asks, can you kindly give details of preprint servers, specifically for medical research? Okay, and it looks like Netza is in the field of psychiatry. So Gareth, offhand, I know it's not your field or mine. You're in historical biology and I'm in education, but offhand, do you know of any preprint servers that might be suitable for medical research, specifically for psychiatry?
Oh, well, let's have a look at Med Archive, like as a starting point. Like what we'll do as well, everybody, is send you a list of preprint platforms. We have a list of those. We'll share that with everybody after the event as well. But there are, within the Med Archive, have a look at Med Archive. Within that kind of ecosystem of preprint platforms, there is an area where you can submit preprints within your subdiscipline, your medical subdiscipline. So be that psychology or whichever field you are in, like MedArchive will be the place to go. Fantastic question. I'm also seeing questions for Julie. Julie, if you're here, do write some comments in the chat as well for everybody because we have colleagues, Zainab, for example, asking which Bentham journals are waiving their article processing charges. Now, I want to jump in and say all of them throughout the course of this trial, but I will wait and see for Julie to confirm that. But
That's
there's a
exactly
trial
what
going on, right?
that's exactly what Julie has just posted. Thank you, Julie. She just answered our question. She does say all journals are going to waive their APCs. She does add, if they publish open access in any of our Scopus indexed titles, their articles will be available on Science Direct. And she's got a link. So, any questions about which journals? The answer is, in short, all journals for the trial. Click on the link that Julie has kindly shared in the chat to Bentham's Elsevier Science Direct collection. So click on the link for more information. Great question, and thank you so much for that.
I
Any other
think I'm getting a
questions
bit
from?
deaf. I think I'm going a bit deaf, Scott. What did you say about all of those Bentham titles being listed in Science Direct? That's great for researchers, right? They get lots more visibility with their research.
Absolutely, yes. We should have mentioned that earlier. As Julie mentioned in her chat, if you do publish in any of those Scopus indexed titles, then they will be available for Science Direct, thus expanding your publication impact. So that's another bonus to publishing with Bentham. Any other questions from our guests today? If you have a question, don't be shy. Feel free to post it. There are no bad questions at all. I wanted to mention about the controversial question title, Gareth. I know as an editor, I often try to discourage authors from using questions in titles because the sense is that authors are meant to be providing answers to questions rather than asking them. But they do pop up from time to time, these question style titles. Have you used them in any of your published papers?
I have. I like them actually. I find them to be quite compelling because people do think, "Ooh, that's an interesting question. I would like to learn
Mm,
the answer to that question." And so they go on and they read the paper. We call them interrogative or interrogative as a style of writing. Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't do them all the time with all of your article titles, but yeah, like, it's a great way to, be non-declarative. So you're not giving the answer, you're just asking a question. So it
mhm.
can be a great approach. Muriel's asking in the chat as well, how long does the APC free trial waiver last? Well, if you can get your fantastic paper submitted to Bentham Science before July the 10th, then you'll have a great chance because, of course, it has to go through peer review, which at Bentham is a very robust process, triple blind, as we've talked about. But yeah, if you can get your paper in by July the 10th, you will not have to pay a single penny for open access publishing with Bentham Science.
Great. Thanks for your questions and thanks for your answer, Gareth. Let's see if we have some more questions from our guests today. Yes, we did answer our question about waivers on APCs. Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Some other questions coming in. Let me just see if I've got this correct. Actually, I had a similar question for you, Gareth. If we go back to the slide about aiming high for journal selection, uh, a question we get all the time is how do you balance aiming high when you select a journal versus avoiding rejection? What are some strategies basically that authors can use to try to find that sweet spot between aiming high as you select a journal versus getting rejected by a journal that's too good for my paper? Any
Mm, we
advice on
have
that?
We have some checklists, and we showed a few of them in this event today. So do have a look, listen back, have a look at the recording of this event when we send it to you in the next few days. And yeah, this is something that comes with experience. Of course, you can't publish all of your research in those leading international highest impact factor journals, but by making pre-submission inquiries about your research, by writing to journal editors, you start to get a sense of which journals would be most appropriate for that particular piece of work. So if you've got an outcome, you know the results, perhaps you've got a draft title, perhaps some information from the abstract, put that into our email template, send it off to a few journal editors. Maybe you've got that list of 5 or 10 journals that you'd ideally like to publish your work in. Editors will get back to you, and then you'll start to get a more clear sense of which journal you could be using for that piece of research, minimizing your chances of rejection. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day. Scott?
Great. Thanks, Gareth. Thank you for your answer. Let me go to another question here. Let's go to some questions on pre-submission inquiries. What exactly should I include in a pre-submission email? Great question. We're going to send you a template uh, tomorrow at about this time when we share the video recording and certificate with you. We'll also include Gareth's special pre-submission inquiry template, and this will show you everything you need to include. It's basically just an email. You include some basic information about your paper. Gareth, you're a journal editor. What do you like to see in a pre-submission inquiry email? You're busy, you're working through your day, an email comes in from an author. What do you hope to see in a pre-submission inquiry email from an author?
That's a great tip because do keep your editors in mind when you write these pre-submission inquiries. What do editors care about most of all? They care about articles being published in their journals that other researchers are going to want to read because that will increase the citation rate for the journal. The journal will be higher up the rankings this time next year. So editors want interesting, informative, readable papers that will be of interest to their readership, to the community of researchers that engage with that journal. So make sure you do tell the journal editor why your paper is a good fit for that journal. So I would say that's the number one thing that editors are looking for. Why is this paper interesting for this journal? And with that in mind, when you do send pre-submission inquiries or even cover letters, when you make your submissions, do carefully check that you have updated the cover letter or the pre-submission inquiry to reflect the journal that you're actually sending the paper to. We get lots of submissions from authors where they haven't edited their cover letter. Nothing gives the game away that I'm their second or third choice, and that's not what you want as an editor.
Right. You might hurt Gareth's feelings if you're his sixth or seventh choice of journal at historical biology over there. So please don't do that to Gareth. You'll break his heart. Great question here from another guest asks, I did submit to a journal recently where I made pre-submission inquiry and the editor encouraged me to submit. Okay, great. Good for you for making that first step initially, which I did with all supporting documents, and I got 9 reviewers' feedback of rejection despite reaching the journal's editor and attaching my abstract. With you, how is the outcome? Okay, Gareth, this happens all the time, right? There's no guarantee of publication, even with a solid pre-submission inquiry and a solid submission. Um, Gareth, you've published so many papers. How do you handle this kind of rejection at that stage?
Wow, 9 peer reviews, all of them rejecting the paper. That's quite substantial. Well, as Scott mentioned, what we're doing is just trying to minimize that chance of rejection, matching your paper to a good journal. So the editor might think this is a good fit for the journal. They've allowed you to submit. That's great. But of course, your paper still has to be peer reviewed. So unless you are submitting a book review or an invited editorial, you will be subject to peer review at almost every journal, almost every stage as you go into the peer reviewed literature. And of course, the editor can't control what the peer reviewers are going to say. They're there to police those comments to make sure that you're not getting overly aggressive or completely out of hand, inappropriate comments on your paper, but they will not be able to change the outcome if peer reviewers are overwhelmingly rejecting the article. So what we would say is, if you get rejected, take the positives from that experience, try and turn it into a positive experience rather than a negative one. Of course, it's quite difficult to do, but there will be comments in the peer reviews that you can take on board, use to improve the study, and then send it to another journal, right, Scott? It's a consistent kind of all the time recycling once you get rejected, I would.
Right. We're all human. None of us enjoy the process of rejection, especially if we put a lot of our heart and soul and hard work and energy into producing something. Getting rejected never feels nice. But if we can focus on the teachables from each rejection, as Gareth says, absorb those comments, understand, and use them to make our work better. That's how we progress and learn that, as Gareth said, if you do recycle your submission to the next journal, then of course make sure to tailor your submission to that journal and that editor, and of course tailor the paper itself to that journal's requirements, whether it's formatting, etc. So yeah, great advice from Gareth, and thank you for your question. I hope we answered your question correctly. I wasn't sure if I caught that right, but thanks for your question. It's an excellent one. We might have time for just one more. Gareth, here's a question. How much do editors really rely on the abstract and title when deciding? Oh, okay, you're a journal editor. Title and abstract, how important are they?
Extremely important. I would say that we know that from our own work. We know that from working with a range of different publishers across the industry over the last few years, including, of course, our friends at Bentham Science. But yes, of course, a title and abstract really will contribute to forming that initial impression in your editor's mind as to what should happen next with the paper. So, yes, very important. Do put the time and energy into these. Many authors, many researchers do not do that. They write these in a rush at the end of the process. Do take the time and effort and energy to write a great title and a great abstract. And if you haven't had the chance to take a screenshot of this slide, do so. It's the librarian slide, right?
Right. If you are a library manager or director, please scan the QR code, get yourself a free trial for Bentham for 3 months, no strings attached. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today as we come to the end of our event. Thank you for your fantastic questions, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we're thrilled to be here. South Africa is a growing and emerging area for researchers. There's lots of exciting research coming out of South Africa these days. So we hope to see more and more. Gareth, any final thoughts or messages for our guests joining us today.
It's great to do these with you, Scott. Thank you so much for your time and energy, and it's been really great. My mother grew up in South Africa, so I'm always delighted to have any opportunities to interact with researchers from your amazing country. Do follow Bentham Science on these social media channels and check out our webinars. We do a webinar once a month for Bentham Science. You can find all of those on the Bentham Science website. We'll put a link into the chat quickly so you can have a look at what's coming up. We'd love to see more researchers from South Africa in our monthly Bentham webinars. Thanks again, Scott, and have a great day.
Thank you, Gareth, for sharing your expertise with us. We'll send an email out tomorrow, about 24 hours from now, with the full video transcript and Gareth's secret sauce pre-submission inquiry email template. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks to Bentham Science. Have a great day, everyone.